It's never been a secret how much Hirohiko Araki, creator of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, has been influenced by the world of fashion and art. Not only with JoJo, but with earlier works of his, such as Gorgeous Irene and Bao. His passion for drawing stemmed from finding his father's art books in the 70s and learning from them. From almost the very beginning of his career as a mangaka, he has used glamorous Western pop culture as a jumping-off point for his now signature style, combining classical and iconic pieces from the old masters with a bevy of inspiration from the world of clothing culture. Eventually, his passion for fashion would come full circle with a collaborative effort, Gucci Hirohiko Araki Spur, which would be an exhibition of new clothing designs coinciding with a one-shot manga from the creator, Rohan Kishibe Goes to Gucci. When examining this, there does form a question: what were the specific influences for Araki? Such a vibrant and unique style doesn't come from nowhere. He has claimed that his favorite fashion house and fashion creator is the Italian-based Franco Moschino. However, it was more Moschino's fashion itself that influenced Araki, claiming he liked the symbols the Italian fashion creator would put in his work, rather than actual artwork, similar to Gianni Versace and his use of colors in fashion. In doing research, I did find 3 major artists who were the mangaka's biggest influences in the actual looks of the books he would create, 2 of whom were very prominent in the world of fashion. Tony Viramontes, Antonio Lopez, and Paul Gauguin seem to be the most common elements that formed Araki's vision for how his characters would look and his very famous poses. So who were these 3 men, and what makes them so influential as to be the kindling for what is quickly becoming one of the most popular anime and manga even 30 years after conception? To do that, we'll have to go even further back than you might think. So let's take a look at the works of Antonio Lopez, Tony Viramontes, and Paul Gauguin, and how they helped shape the world of Hirohiko Araki. Starting with the historically earliest of the influential artists, it begins with French artist Paul Gauguin. Gauguin, born Eugène-Henri Paul Gauguin in 1848, was a post-impressionism artist and can somewhat be considered a, if not the, father of synthesism, a movement described as to emphasize two-dimensional flat patterns, thus breaking with impressionist art in theory. The style shows a conscious effort to work less directly from nature and rely more upon memory. He was a friend of Vincent van Gogh, and rejected the conventions of Impressionism of which he was trained. His style was considered rebellious of the conventions during the era of his work when it was most prevalent, appropriate for someone as unique in the world of manga in look and style as Araki-sensei. He believed in focusing on the emotion of art rather than the details. In Gauguin's case, he preferred a liberal freedom to his work, using vibrant and unique colors, and minimizing the use of outlines. Araki's greatest takeaway from Gauguin was the use of colors. Araki has said none of his characters have a traditional set color scheme, which is illustrated through the David production anime, which will often use their own color template for characters and will change the palette and contrast of scenes based on emotional moments. He uses high contrasting colors in order to create an otherworldly feel, similar to how Gauguin would present Tahiti in an almost mythical way using unconventional coloring and shaping. Of the 3 artists, Gauguin's work is probably the least recognizable in Araki's work, probably due to colors not being very prominent in printing manga, and Gauguin having next to nothing of influence in the world of fashion. In fact, most of his work usually didn't have even much clothing to speak of. Above almost anything else, JoJo as a series would probably be known best for the posing. Disregarding the flamboyantly designed stands, musical rock references, and the charmingly bizarre dialogue that has infected its way into modern-day culture, the posing is the one thing that is universally remembered by fans and non-fans. For Araki's love of striking visual movement, none can be closer attributed than Tony Viramontes. Something of a rebel to the traditional artwork of his contemporaries, not unlike Gauguin, Viramontes was born in California by Spanish and Mexican parents, and began his rise in the early 70s with his heavily different style in how he outlined bodies and minimal use of color. Viramontes was a photographer first before moving on to illustration, making him a fountain of knowledge on human movement. Much of his notable work would feature models posing in unorthodox mannerisms to create dynamic visuals. Another quirk of his live-action photography was the scribbles he would draw on the models, adding a layer of personality not seen by his predecessors, his contemporaries, or even his successors. This use of vibrant outlines on more traditional colors to help emphasize may have inspired some of Araki's artwork as early as covers of Cool Shock BT, which uses darker backgrounds interspersed with almost neon lines. For the world of black and white illustration and manga creation, it makes sense that a pop culture conscious mangaka like Hirohiko Araki would resonate towards an artist who could make so much style out of so little. Giving a connection to the world of music, another one of Araki's passions that helped inspire JoJo, VIRAMONTES would also do the artwork for the Duran Duran spin-off band Arcadia for their album So Red the Rose. He would also direct the photo shoot for Janet Jackson's Control and All Systems Go for Donna Summer. In the biographical book Bold, Beautiful, and Damned, The World of Tony Viramontes by Dean Rice Morgan, a quote from Viramontes states, "It is essential to capture the image, not the detail, not the garment or an expression, but an impression. Of the hundreds of sketches I might make for one drawing, it's almost always the first that states the essential." As an artist, Viramontes was never interested in detail as much as impact. This mentality may have given Araki the incentive for bold, dynamic moments throughout the entirety of JoJo, creating some of the series' most iconic moments that can transcend even knowledge of the franchise. The first two artists talked about in this video have helped Hirohiko Araki develop a basis for his memorable designs. However, there has probably been no greater influence to the look and personality of Araki's works than Puerto Rican-born fashion illustrator Antonio Lopez. Much like Viramontes, Lopez's popularity stemmed from his freelance work in fashion magazines such as Vogue, Elle, and the New York Times during the 1970s to the 80s. Like Araki, his style would constantly be evolving over time, sometimes to the point of it being unequivocal to one another. Not unlike Gauguin, Lopez was a fan of extravagant coloring as well, which helped give the fashion he would design personality for how unapologetically over the top it could be. Probably no better exemplified than his Missoni 1983 work, which was likely one of Araki's earliest inspirations. Missoni is a still-running Varese-based high-end fashion house created by Ottavio and Rosina Missoni that hired Lopez in 1983, hence the title, to work on a series of illustrations for the company's magazine. The style was vibrant and dynamic, with strong-looking models, who still managed to give unique poses and wear loud clothing. This would be the jumping-off point for Araki's earliest character designs, and would be the building blocks for the evolution of his art. In Volume 1 of the recent reprint of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Araki discusses how Jonathan was conceived, saying, "It was an era of muscles on the silver screen, guys like Schwarzenegger and Stallone. Schwarzenegger, for example, could never be stopped by any amount of gunfire, right? I wanted Jonathan to have a similar look to him." Even before JoJo and Jonathan had been realized, existed the character of Michael in Gorgeous Irene, the main character's boyfriend who served as a prototypical style of manly that Araki would use until the midway point of Diamond is Unbreakable. Regarding another creation of Araki's, Bao is probably the mangaka's second most successful manga series, earning an OVA 4 years before even JoJo had one. Looking through the pages, it seems to be the true beginnings of Araki's utilization of fashion illustration. Even Bao's Tankoban shares a framing technique similar to some of Antonio Lopez's work. Besides the series covers, not much else of Araki's love of art is shown through the series, at least not nearly as much as Gorgeous Irene. Irene itself is a wealth of fashion and posing references littered about from both Lopez and Viramontes, both in character posing and inspiration. The look of the villain herself, Roba, seems to have been taken from Lopez's works. No artist better exemplified Araki's style more than Lopez. Araki would almost just take clothing designs straight from the source and implement them into his own character designs, or at least alternative versions. Even as Araki's style changed, the vision of Lopez still had its touches. From Part 4 forward, the mangaka took a page from Lopez's more common style, homogenizing it with Tony Viramontes' aggressive faces, most specifically the lips. Even so, Araki has developed his own style, incorporating inspiration with trial and error on his own experiences working in the Japanese manga industry, culminating in a detailed and appropriately bizarre style that still is able to stand out from any other manga available today. Creators often need to look for experiences outside of their craft for inspiration. For mangaka, they'll often look at their favorite movies, sports, and even personal trauma for the right trajectory for a project. Hirohiko Araki has done the same thing. It just happens one of his inspirations is unique to most others. Loving fashion and respecting its flavorful wildness gave him the spark to be able to add his own signature work on Japanese culture. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is more universally popular now than it ever has been before. However, it's no surprise how popular it's been in Italy over the years, given its connection to fashion and Italian artwork, and the fact that Battle Tendency and Vento Audio at least at some point both take place in Italy. It's funny then that most of the art inspiration for the series comes from a Frenchman, a Spanish Mexican American, and Puerto Rican American. For such a world-traveling series as JoJo, it's more than appropriate that the series' world would be shaped by so many different cultures. It just goes to show that, much like JoJo, the world of fashion is created through learning and adapting from many different cultures.